my boding, enter with force into your rightful realm. Restore for me the power of thought, which in the senses shine, so wills to lose itself. We come through winter where the power of thinking was stronger, and now we're sensing it's going to fade again as we get to summer. It's my pleasure to welcome David Gershan. David is going to speak to us thoughts inspired by the lecture, The Etherisation of the Blood, which we find in the collection of lectures by Rudolf Steiner called The Reappearance of Christ in the Etheric. And many of you will remember that we studied that lecture series as a Faust branch, and sometimes with many of you nationally, during the Holy Night season. And already at that time, we wished to include this lecture as part of the series, but it wasn't possible to include it also. And so we have been trying to get this presentation by David for actually several months. And it's appropriate that it comes now at the end of the season. David Gershan is probably known to many or most of you. He's a physician working in San Francisco, and he has had an extraordinarily busy life as an anthroposophical physician. His passion was doing public health medicine, and he worked in many clinics, set up clinics, taking care of, among other things, street people, and really a social activist in that sense. But he also worked in many hospitals and now is semi-retired, but still carries on a practice as an anthroposophical physician. And he's very active in working on training for anthroposophical physicians. So he brings a great deal of knowledge and insight to us. And I'd like to welcome you very much, David. Come on in, unmute yourself, and we'll go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia. You are too kind to me. Yeah. So we are in a very interesting time. Certainly an interesting time in the year. We are still in the Whitsun mood, and it is very important that I know you've had a presentation on Whitsun on the 12th of May, but I'd like to go over it. And I'd like to go over the Whitsun mood in the season because it will be essential background for a discussion of this lecture, The Etherisation of the Blood. I don't intend to pick apart the lecture, Etherisation of the Blood. It's very packed. But what I would like to do is to stay on a certain path, and that is the path of how does the individual prepare for this etheric Christ? How do we do that? So there are going to be some treats here. But before that, I'd like to go over from my perspective, and you all know, and please chime in, what is Whitsun? What is the Pentecost? And why is it so absolutely important for our time? It is important for our time because in the 20th century, the Christ had entered the etheric and began a presence for all humankind and for the entire earth and the entire karma of the earth and the future of the earth at that time. the momentousness of that was 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 discussed in anthroposophic circles. I am not sure whether it was discussed elsewhere, but we are the recipients of Steiner's lectures and the glad tidings of the event in the 20th century, and that has now been inaugurated. We are now almost 100 years into that, and what does this have to do with Whitson? Well, as you recall, a certain time after the mystery of Golgotha, wherein the blood of Christ actually entered into the earth, which we will get to, the Christ ascended into the etheric, and this is discussed in the Bible as vanishing into the clouds. Yeah, and this was noted by his disciples. 10 days later, another event happened, and this was the event popularly known as the tongues of fire, the tongues of flame, wherein all of the disciples were then made capable of and aware of a new message that transcended all people, all differences, all languages, all cultural traditions, and all religions. And this is the knowledge that the Christ was in the etheric, and the necessity, the urge to preach this information. And this is what happened. This was the impulse there. So at the mystery of Golgotha, which was very decisive in terms of the Anthroposophical period, and the history of the earth, and all of the earth incarnations, this specific moment, a turning point in all time happened. And without it, the human being would have no future, because the forces of decay, the forces of crumbling, the forces of mineralization, the mineralization of thinking, descending even lower into evil, were afoot. And it was at that precise moment that it was necessary for a protection to come about. And that protection was offered by at the mystery of Golgotha. Christ and his blood created a renewal, a continuous renewal of the human being, incarnation after incarnation. This would not have been possible without this event. That, among other incredibly profound events, happened at Golgotha. Christ's karma became forever united with the earth, hence the phrase, the Lord of Karma. And here is a very interesting aspect to that. The etheric bodies of human beings were also protected at this event, because the etheric body actually does not really like to hang around. It doesn't like to stay put in the human being. And actually, it does not like to stay put in the earth. The etheric world is always seeking the sun from which it came. There is, and hence the knowledge of the levity that that the etheric body confers upon the human being, and how the etheric of the earth is one of upbuilding and growth, um, uh, because there is the desire, and we know this at Michaelmas, there is the desire to fly into the sun. That is always there. Um, and this going out would have then augured the end of human evolution, because the earth itself was becoming less and less hospitable to the human being. And this is so now. And there's a necessity to this, a profound necessity, which we hope to discuss later. So that is a setting that can bring us to a look at this lecture, the etherization of the blood. In the human being, the blood is created as an anabolic product. That means that through digestion, the blood is then built, and it is then able to rise higher and higher in the human being, to offer itself as the vehicle of warmth, the vehicle of the ego of the human being. And all of this is anabolic, all of this is buildup. But at a certain point, the blood becomes etherized in the human being. This is necessary. The blood loses a great deal of its earthiness, of its weight, and it begins to enter chemical modifications. And that is as it approaches actually beyond the heart, as it now begins to rise even higher and higher into the head region, the blood now must become closer and closer to something actually non-living. But this does not happen. But there is this threshold that is approached, and that we gauge by the level of carbonic acid in the blood. The carbonic acid, which is increasing and increasing in the blood as it ascends higher, must go somewhere. It cannot hang around. So we are now looking at the pairing of circulation, blood formation, and breathing. So the lungs and breathing are an upper pole to this middle system. The lower pole, the more organic pole, would be the blood and circulation. So we have a polarity here between blood and circulation. And it is now the lungs' function to expel carbonic acid through exhalation. And this is indeed what happens. There is an even greater pairing here. And that is the necessity for carbon dioxide, a product of carbonic acid in a certain chemical path, the necessity that the plant receive carbon dioxide. The plant cannot live without carbon dioxide. Most plants cannot. And what does the plant expel? The plant then expels oxygen. The human being cannot live without oxygen. Now, I know you all know this. We were all in the 8th grade together, and we all studied photosynthesis. But to put this now in the context of the etherization of the blood and where we're going to go with this, I think is something very, very profound. And as the doc, or as a doc, I'd like to present insights that have very real or organic um, uh, connections, and I hope you can appreciate that. So here we have a microcosm. We have in the human being as if there were an inner L being created and rising up of the warmed blood, the blood that is full of vitality and nutrients. And gradually the blood loses that vitality and, and it comes to a threshold that it does not cross over unless one is ready to cross the greater threshold. And then that threshold happens. There are also other conditions where that happens, deep coma, etc., or kidney failure requiring dialysis. Their mechanical help uh, uh, must come to the patient in order to perform this kind of activity here, the filtration and the detoxifying and the rejuvenating of blood. Anyway, so this is a mighty picture there. But there is an even larger picture. And for this, we must go back to Christ's blood through wounds entering into the earth. And here we have a descent of blood, but it is the most unique blood. Here we have a descent of the blood now into the earth. This is etherized blood. This is the blood of Christ that has already come to a greater participation in the etheric world, the great etheric world that surrounds us. We as individuals have etheric bodies. We have parts of this etheric nature in us all. All plants have parts of this. All animals have parts of this etheric world. And the earth has a part of the greater etheric world. And this is the world of life. It's the world of upbuilding and levity and ascending. And it is also the world of thoughts. All thoughts, living thoughts, live in the ether. And they enter into the human being at birth or right before birth. All of the thoughts, all of the living thoughts. Now, the thinking or the access to the thoughts, that's another matter. That's something that we do with the brain, actually. So getting back to this greater etherization, there is now a macrocosmic etherization of the blood. This etherized blood that has entered into the earth also has an ascension. And it has an ascension into the etheric world as well. Without it, the human being would decay. The earth, which will decay and which is on its way to decay, is being appropriately organified through this etherization of the blood, the greater macrocosmic etherization of the blood. But I can tell you from studying Rudolf Steiner that the tipping point of vitality of the earth happened already in Atlantis. So we have for eons now been mineralizing. There were no rocks at that time. There was no real mineralization. But at a certain point, this mineralization began to occur. We cannot think without this. We do not have teeth without the mineralizing process. And the earth must break down and decay. And it is, and it will. And it will so that the etheric earth can be freed. This cannot happen without the greater etherization of the blood. This is a very, very mighty process. It's an awesome process. Now, besides this, there are new faculties that that come to the human being, and the new faculties of thinking and knowing, something that I alluded to very briefly last night in yet another Zoom presentation. These new faculties have been long in the preparation form, okay, as an intellectual and cognitive process. This new faculty was really inaugurated by Goethe and Steiner's discovery of Goethe. What did Steiner discover in Goethe? He discovered a way of evaluating and appreciating phenomena. So we call Goethe a phenomenologist, one who is observing, and from the observations attempts to make make inspired statements. I don't know whether any of you have ever studied the color theory, but it is quite exciting. What is required is a prism and a piece of white paper, and the ability to make black lines on it and black blocks. If you have the very famous Mattei version, I have it somewhere. Already Goethe's study drawings are in this book, and you are taken step by step through Goethe's observations. It is very exciting. For instance, you see black on one side, you see white on the other side of the page. Now take your prism, and I want you to locate the prism so that light is, as it were, separated out. And you will see something that I have seen. And that is, you will see a whole range of colors that emerge into the black part, and a whole range of colors that emerge into the white part. And so on and on, Goethe takes these observations to very, very profound places. And I urge you to get a hold of the color theory and to actually do it. It is fun, and this is a taste of Goethe. That taste is not really there in the Metamorphosis of Plants, but yet the observations are there. So this ability to observe, but what is more, the ability to allow what you observe to then live in you. And this living, thinking, picturing ability is new. And it is there for us. Many of us feel that we were born with this. Many of us come to this. We come to this appreciation. More and more people will come to this capability. It is a kind of a deeply artistic, deeply personal, deeply soul-filled process of evaluating phenomena. So here we have something that Steiner very bravely created for the world, statements about the soul as the as the decipherer, as the studier, as the diagnoser, as the evaluator. Subjectivity does not have to rest in a kind of a dreamlike subjectivity. Subjectivity can be developed and taught as well. We can educate our subjective souls, and this is what we are doing now. This is what we do in this very alive picture-making thinking, for lack of other words. And this came about on a widespread level at the time of the presence of the Etheric Christ. Steiner said that this would happen in the 30s, going into 40. So those of us who were born shortly after that, we incarnate with this. We may not be able to use it. We may not even have a thorough awareness of it, but we will. All of us will. So this is one of the great gifts of the mystery of Golgotha, and it is maintained through this greater etherization of the blood. This ability to lift the thinking beyond the materialistic and the mechanical. So I'd like to take us to a little exercise, if you don't mind, and I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, I'm not so sure that the sound will be great, but we are going to, I want you to listen to this. Cynthia and I have spoken about this many times. And the way I want you to listen to this is I want you to place yourself in the middle of what you are listening to, because the voices will begin to accumulate. And either you will be thrust out of this, or you will skim the surface, or you will float around like Paolo and Francesca, or you will actually become involved. This is a great series, by the way. Sorry. Now, the point of this and I'm going to ask Cynthia to help me here. The question is there something about this Bach that invites you somewhere in the soul, somewhere in the listening, and in the beholding? And I would venture to say that indeed there is something about this Bach, and this Bach is unique in Western music for sure. There are other examples. There are examples of this in the ragas, but anyway, so there is a gesture here that I'd like to ask Cynthia to help us with, and that is a certain gesture. And I will explain as we go back to this the point of it all. So Cynthia, please.
Thank you, David. Did you want people to see me, or shall we keep you spotlighted?
Oh, no, let's, if you are going to demonstrate this for a minute, it would be so great. Don't have to. You could just describe it if you'd like.
Yeah, so David and I were speaking about how can we convey this experience of complete openness that we know in the gesture ah. And this is the first of all the sounds. It's the sound of this tremendous, the openness that we would have as an infant, the openness that Adam had in the Garden of Eden, streaming from our hearts with complete receptivity. And I'm going to assume, and I hope that you all know eurythmy, but we actually would like to do, David would like to do a double ah, one ah going upwards and one going downwards through the legs. And as we talked about it, we realized that this actually becomes another exercise that we know in eurythmy called light streams upwards and weight bears downwards. So if you can engage this visual imagination that David was just talking about, and imagine from below your heart, even below your solar plexus, a gesture, an open triangle streaming upwards. And if you want to actually move it, then lift your arms into this upward facing triangle. The gesture is so close to an ah gesture, although we generally do this as a geometric experience. Streaming up, and as you are streaming up, you make yourself open so that the world can stream into you. You have created yourself as a vessel. And then without losing that, we also add a grounding element. And so from above your heart, you're going to make or imagine a second triangle streaming down through your legs towards the earth, open triangle. And we can experience that also with the openness of the ah experience. And now comes the jewel of this whole exercise, because where the two triangles overlap, if you can sense that, there is the shape of a diamond, and that diamond is in the area of your heart, solar plexus heart region. And so as you imagine or actually do this, you feel a third feeling, sensation, and in that you experience the words in the middle, I hold the balance. And it's this balance in the heart region, in the middle of your opening, upwards and downwards, this balance in the heart that David wants to call your attention to.
Wow. Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Very, very beautiful. I'd like to go back to this music, and I'd like you to now enter into the middle of all of these voices. As a cellist, I have for years studied Bach, studied the cello suites, and what I can say is that the ascending and descending fifths and fourths counterpose to other progressions. If you do not place yourself in the middle, you will lose the impulse of this music. But besides that, if you do place yourself in the middle, you will then enter a very peculiar cognitive area, and that is the beholding and the holding of various diverse voices, rhythms, ascending and descending motives, but you will hold it. And this is a very, very rare experience that we can have from Bach. We also can find it in the Balinese gamelan. One finds it in many places. And human beings have this capacity now to behold living ideas, unlike 100 years ago. So let's go back, and I want you to really place yourself in the middle of all of this activity. Well, thank you. Thank you for indulging that. Those of you who've studied the piano and remember the two-part inventions, you know that as a student, as a young student, there comes a time when you enter into a beholding place. You are witnessing two different voices, and you are in the center, holding them. It is a profound experience, and it is one that I would say is becoming a greater and greater capacity among human beings. All right, want to go to yet another exercise, and I want you to do. I'd like to invite you to do. I want you to sit still for a few seconds. Don't close your eyes. Just look straight ahead. Look at something. Look at the room. Look at articles on your table. Now, I want you to consider how you are looking. You are looking straight ahead. There is the light that affords you the vision. Yeah. But I want you to take a moment now to consider that behind this forward vision is another world. And it is in back of this forward vision filled with light that you take for granted. But in back of this is a much vaster world, and it is in the dark. It is in absolute blackness. And that is a world that I want you to think about. The eurythmists know all about this. It is a world that we now should understand and appreciate um, and allow into our consciousness. And I would venture to say that never again, my friends, will you look only straight ahead. You will come back to this exercise. It has altered you already. But this is an important milestone in the development of our ability to perceive the world, um, and to live in the world of thoughts, the world of creation, the world of creativity. It is the back. And we, for the most part, ignore it. One of the great gifts of eurythmy for me has been uh, the um, the introduction to worlds that I hadn't paid attention to. And it is through eurythmy, I think, above all, that that anyone who has the patience and the and can submit to the artistry will have experiences of an etheric world that that are lost to those who merely live in mechanical thinking and the tyranny of deductive reasoning. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. So this lecture, the Etherisation of the Blood, was given in 1911. And at that time, there was vocabulary that Steiner ceased to use. Vocabulary such as the astral plane or Devachan, lower Devachan, higher Devachan, lower Devachan. It's, you know, it's just like being on an elevator in Macy's. And that kind of vocabulary really Steiner overcame. And for me, the important part here is that the light that we must have is in a process of decay. The light that streams upward and eventually is lost in the cosmos, or that seeks its sun, is in a process of decay as well. And the decaying light becomes electricity. And even greater than that, there is a much greater force. There are many greater forces than the electricity. We have nuclear fission, which we have had now for many years. We all know the power of nuclear fission, and we know the power of atomic energy, the bomb, the ability for an atomic reactor to supply uh, uh, energy to actually drive electricity. But we know that, and there will be others. There has been research. You must know Tesla's research. So the light does decay into this this subworldly nature, but it also rises. It brings us now to a very profound part of this talk, and that is the question: does the microcosmic etherization of the blood and the macrocosmic etherization of the blood, do they have anything to do with each other? You can see that one is a magnification of the other, but can they come together? And do they come together? They only come together in one way. And that way is an understanding of the meaning of the etheric Christ, the meaning of the mystery of Golgotha as not a religious pursuit necessarily, not not as a dogma, but as a mystical fact. This would be the way to combine the two streams. Otherwise, they will not combine. And what is the result here? The result is that for some people, for some greater uh, parts of the population of the world, there will uh, be a long wait for this possibility to ascend and to free oneself greater and greater from the material which is decaying. Vast parts of the population may not be able to benefit from this coming together of these two streams. This could be the most important message in anthroposophy, the study of spiritual science, how it affects you, how it changes one, how it develops one, how it develops the soul, so that an evolutionary process can be assured. This is really one of the great goals of anthroposophia herself, brought to us, inaugurated by Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner is not the anthroposophy. He is not the anthroposophia, but he is the great inaugurator of this Sophia for our time. A little bit more about physical decay. The earth must decay. It is decaying, and it must decay. As I said earlier, it must decay in order for the etheric earth to free itself from the decaying physical earth. All bodies do this. The moon has done this. The earth will do this and become a satellite around Jupiter. That's not happening anytime soon, but this is kind of the projected pattern here. So I'm pretty much finished with my talk. I did not really go into the development of morality and its meaning in post mystery of Golgotha world. That the morality of the universe, it will enter deeper and deeper into the earth and deeper into human souls in time. And it will become a freely chosen or a freely ignored process of evolution. There will be the possibility to embrace the evil, or there will be the free possibility to embrace the moral.